Okay, what I did today, because I'm coming down with this cold and it's a little rough on my throat and I didn't want to irritate you guys with my voice, is I decided to throw a quick PowerPoint together, and we're going to be using this instant technology called Poll Everywhere. And I'm going to be displaying a slide with maybe a question, maybe a picture, and it's going to ask you guys, doesn't count against you, it's completely anonymous, of what do you think that port is. Then we get to that port, I'll go into more details. Remember, today we're going to be covering ports and storage devices, correct? It's the last bit of hardware we need to cover. On Tuesday we talked about the factors of performance. We got into the CPU and the parts of the CPU. I said there are three components, the ALU, the CU, the cache. All of these are very testable. The other thing I got into when we were talking about computer hardware is the relationship between storage, memory, and the processor, correct? And so our biggest bottleneck right now is in storage. So we'll explore that. So let's begin. You guys have the very first question on Poll Everywhere. Remember, it's just feedback from me to see where you guys stand. The question that we have is, what is a port? So you have four choices, and hopefully on your screen you guys have A, B, C, or D. All you have to do is click on one of the choices that you feel what it is. So A, allows users to upgrade their processors. B, allows the user to communicate with other devices. C, allows users to connect to storage-only devices, such as flash drives, if you will. Or D, allows computers to only receive data. Like a keyboard would be a means to importing data into a computer, or inputting data. So hopefully this works. And like I said, this is instant technology. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 students. And right now out of the 14 students, I have 11 results. And it looks like the majority of the people are voting B. I have 9% of you voting C. And so we're not going to move on until you guys get me only 14, right? Can I go back? Yes, sure, I can go back. So this technology called Poll Everywhere, we're going to explore when we get to the internet. You can see how useful it is by having a device. The cool thing about it is you can also use it with your cell phones. You can just text a number. And so if you're in cell phone coverage, you can just automatically submit your answer. And it doesn't spam you afterwards. All right, so I have my 14. And the majority of the class is correct. If I go back to the question, it does allow the computer, or does allow the user to communicate with other devices. Other devices are like your keyboard, your mouse, your printer, your speakers, your monitor. We call those I/O devices. In fact, the most popular way to plug in an I/O device is through ports. Okay. On to the next question, which I need to do something else now, right? So I need to come here and I need to go to my next question, which should now change on your screen, and it should say slide 4. Is that right? No? Oh, that's right. That's a stupid button. Now does it change? Yeah. Okay. And is that my slide 4? Let me bounce back. Yes, slide 4. All right, so now we're faced with this, and hopefully this is a more practical way of learning this. Yes? Slide 1. Interesting. And you, okay, hit refresh just to see if it will load up into slide 4. There you go. Yep. So this, I hope, is supposed to be more of a practical way for you guys to learn ports, because when you guys get back, when you guys go to the back of your computer, you're going to be faced with a whole lot of ports. And a lot of us just look at something, and if it looks like it fits in there, we put it in there and we expect it to work. When you go buying or shopping, whether it's for a new computer or for a new piece of hardware, it's probably to know better what these ports are and exactly what their specifications are. We're moving away from USB 2 to USB 3, for example, and there's a big difference. And I wish my phone supported USB 3, because it takes me about 30 minutes to transfer every lecture over to my hard drive. This is those transfer rates that we've been talking about. Now, the newer iPhones are using another port, which is a lot faster. It takes my friend maybe 2 minutes to transfer her 2-hour movies from her phone to her computer. And I'm envious. I mean, this is why it takes forever, because not only do I have to transfer to my computer, but I have to process it, manipulate it, convert it into a format that YouTube understands, upload it, all which takes at least a day or two. So that's why the videos aren't posted immediately at the end of the same day that I record it, okay? So what is this port? Let's take a look. See what the rest of the class, and this is a well-known port, and I'm pretty pleased with the results. Everybody, well, I need 2 more votes. Well, 1 more would help. And there we go. Surprise, surprise. It's nice to know. But yeah, it is a USB port. USB has 3 different variations out there. There's the version 1.1, which was 12 megabits per second. That's about 1.25 megabytes. So when I record my videos, my lectures, they're about 13 gigabytes. And remember, the difference between a mega and a giga, right, is another 1,000. So it would take me over 13,000 seconds to copy that using USB 1.1. But they didn't care, because back in the day, all they were thinking was one common port for your printer, your mouse, and your keyboard, all of which didn't use that much bandwidth or needed that high transfer rate, correct? I mean, you guys are lucky to be able to type in 100 words per minute. And even 100 words per minute would translate to what? How many bits are in a letter?
8.
8, right? So let's say the average word's about 4. So that would be 32 bits. And multiply that by what? 60, because we do 60 seconds in a minute. And you would see that USB 1 would be more than enough to handle that. Because when we went shopping, the older computers, which this computer no longer has, had special PS2 ports, one for the keyboard, one for the mouse, and everything was like its own port for its own device, and it just felt so barbaric, if you will. You had to have a degree in computer science just to be able to plug in I/O devices. And how often are we buying new I/O devices, whether printer, cameras, MP3 players, or phones? And that's why the U in USB is universal. The S is serial, and the B is bus. We learned a little bit about bus without me calling it a bus. Those pathways that connect the processor to memory or to storage are called bus, or buses, right? We clear? Good? All right. USB 2 is one of the most common ports out there. It's about 480 megabits per second. A huge leap. And that only happened because when USB 1 came out, Apple came out with Firewire, which we'll see shortly, and Firewire was 400. So there's competition between Macs and PCs, because Macs were pushing out faster transfer rates. Why would Mac want to be selling this Firewire, and why would they want to come up with something with a huge bandwidth of like 400 megabits per second? What kind of users tend to use Macs back in the day? The video people, right? The photo people, which would generate a lot of data. You couldn't take your Mac to take a picture. You had to use some camera, right? And you had to transfer whatever on that camera into your computer. You didn't want to wait forever, especially if you're paying your graphic artist people by the hour. Because they're sitting there having a cup of coffee because it's going to take them 13 hours for the video to transfer before they can even do anything with it. And that's what USB 1 was like. So Firewire was out, competing with USB 1. Then IEEE comes out with USB 2. And now we're back forth. Well, Apple releases another Firewire, which is 800 megabits per second. And for the longest time, we've been dealing with Firewire and USB 2. Well, although it's been out for a while, it just became standard, I think, last year. USB 3 is officially out. My flash drive is USB 3. I'm loving it. All the external hard drives that I buy are USB 3. It looks almost like that. It's backwards compliant with USB 2 as well as USB 1. The only difference is there's actually added pins down here, which you couldn't see anyway if you wanted to. And you get a transfer rate up to 4.8 gigabits per second. Folks, a few years ago when I was teaching about storage drives, as we'll be getting into at the end of this class, your fastest internal connection was 3 gigabits per second. We always associated external ports as being slower than internal connections. USB 3 and Thunderbolt ports are changing this to the point where we may never have to open up our case to ever upgrade our computers. Because remember, these transfer rates are dictating how we get data from one place to the other, right? Does it matter whether it's internal or external? Back in the day, the answer would have been yes, because internal devices communicated a lot faster than external devices. But today, that's not the case. So let's go on to the next port. All right, so get used to these symbols. This is version 1, and this is version 2. This was a, if I remember correctly, a 6-pin connector, and this was an 8-pin connector. Oh, damn it! You know, I just so used to that happening automatically. Thank you, guys. Because I'm not. And I'll tell you, after class, I won't be. All right, here we go. And if I push it, did it come to everybody? If it doesn't, just hit the refresh button. I'll get my head out of my ass eventually. But see, I'm waiting for that next I/O device where I can just wear a little thing around my forehead and it'll read my thoughts. So then this way, as I'm thinking about this, it would be like, oh yeah, let me just load the next poll for you. By the way, they have those. Have you seen those? It's just, they're trying it. Gamers are the ones that, and it doesn't read your mind's thoughts, it just detects muscle movements. Have you ever seen anybody play a video game? If you ever see me, my tongue's hanging out. But, and my eyes are bloodshot by the end of the day. I had to give it up. I was like a crack. Addicted to video games. But anyway, they detect muscle movements. And apparently when you're thinking about shooting something, I won't say someone, but a particular muscle would move, and then they were able to decode that. Remember the whole process of encoding, decoding? So they have these contraptions that are coming out. We'll see how well it goes. How well did you guys do? Ooh, mixed audience. I'm still waiting for 2 votes. Let's think about it. So we're tied between B and C. Oh, all right, thank you. C, oh, close. The answer is B, Firewire. Yeah, this one would handle 400 megabytes per second, megabits, bits per second. And this was the 800 one. Actually, it was like 7 something, but we rounded up to 800. When you're that close, doesn't matter. They're called Firewire through Apple. Apple was the one that created the port, proprietary, but then we released the PCs and we called it IEEE 1394. You don't need to know that, but do know that this is a Firewire port. This one's faster than USB 2, okay?
So what is it for? It's just transfer?
Any port, just like the beginning, what are ports? Allows us to connect devices together. They could make a Firewire mouse if they wanted to, but that would be a little overkill, correct? Because when you have that bandwidth of 800 megabits per second, you got to think to yourself, well, what would require that kind of bandwidth? External hard drives? Absolutely, because if you're transferring large files, you want to make sure it's done as quick as possible, correct? Cameras, because they generate large data. Do you think it'd be necessary to make a Firewire printer? So this is an excellent question. The question was, what would this port be used for? Well, all ports are used for the same thing, to connect devices together. But more importantly, we got to ask what kinds of devices would be more appropriate for this one. And maybe a printer would be, if you're doing a really high resolution poster printer, But if you're talking about printing out text, overkill, correct? But then we get to the point where, why don't we just have one port to rule them all, if you will? And we're getting there, okay? And that port to me is going to be the Thunderbolt port, okay? So, yeah, this one's probably for like video and hard drives, anything with large amounts of data. Oh, you don't have to remind me this time, I'm learning. But let me just close out of these things because I don't need these up. Oops. And I push it once it loads in. And you guys should be on slide 8, is that right? Mm-hmm. There we go. Yep, we're at the right port. Yep, slide 8, good. This whole multitasking thing I can't do. This port has been becoming increasingly popular over the years because of its popularity, the other popularity of the service that we tend to pay for. Back when I worked for a telephone company, we were stuck between dial-up connections and broadband connections, and a lot of people would look on the back of their computer and they would see something similar to this, but they wouldn't bother counting the pins. A phone jack would have 4 pins, and it would be a little bit smaller. But they would take this kind of connector, which had 8 pins, and it'd be a little bit larger, and jam it in there and expect it to work because they wanted to save themselves $40–50 installing this port. This port comes in various speeds now. It used to start off at 10. Now we're up to about 10 gigabits per second. Now 10 megabytes, okay? I make these assumptions. The average home user is probably at 100 megabits per second, which we call this fast fill in the blank. Let's see what you guys have chose for this. Ooh, a little scatter. I need 2 more people. Are these the 2 people that just wait to see what the rest of the class has to say? All right, let's go back there. And the answer is A. It's Ethernet. We are at now Gigabit Ethernet. And why is this becoming extremely popular and every computer nowadays is coming with it? It's so hard to get rid of it.
Is it digital cable or digital?
Everything's sort of digital now except for one cable, which we'll get in later. This allows us to connect to a network, which allows us to share resources, which allows us to go on the internet, and they offer us a faster connection. And everything is becoming about the connectivity, getting devices to work together. And that's all happening through this kind of cable. It allows us to create what we call a local area network. And a network in plain old terms is when you have 2 or more devices together to share resources. What are resources? Could be files, could be communication, it could be knowledge. It doesn't matter. This cable is making it possible for us to share resources from all over the world. And you know what? We're getting so addicted to this cable that we want it faster and faster and faster. And a lot of my students are like, you know, Nick, I have a dial-up connection or I live out in the country and we don't get broadband, which is really a shame. Let's have some pride. Let's build this country up to what it needs to be. If we're the ones that invented the internet, and it wasn't Al Gore, but if we were the ones that invent the internet, we should be the ones with faster connections. We're ranked like 25 in the world. And it's disturbing. I shouldn't hear my students say, Nick, I don't have a fast connection at home. And I also believe that the internet should be a staple, like PBS, and that every American should have access to free internet. Now, do I believe they should have it at 100 megabits per second? No. PBS doesn't have my Game of Thrones. I have to pay extra for it. But PBS is better than no TV at all, correct? So I strongly believe that. We'll get into that when we get to the network part of this course. But for now, this cable is really making a difference. By the way, if you're one of the students that doesn't have bandwidth at home, if you will, broadband at home, just bring a flash drive in, and I'll copy all my videos over, and you'll get to see the pleasures of USB 2 working. because I'll tell you, leave your flash drive with me, and I'll see you the next day, okay? These videos do take up a lot of space. All right, now I know you don't have to tell me this. I just have to stop talking and get to work. You guys are at slide 10?
Yep.
All right, now you need the answers. Whoops, not that way, or the question. I love this port. It's a brand new port. It was a secret deal between Apple and Intel. They had exclusivity to this for, I think, 2 years maybe. And then they finally released it to the PCs. And the PC community is wondering what to do with the port. I can tell you a whole slew of things to do with this port. This port can handle 10 gigabits per second. That's faster than any internal connection we have, whether it's SATA or SATA or SATA, because most of the internal connections nowadays are just serial ATA. Used to be IDE and so on. 10 gigabits per second. This is my dream port. The reason why I love this port so much is because it acts like USB, because you can daisy chain it with other devices, which is pretty cool. But because of its large bandwidth, I can add memory externally without opening up my case. Translation, I can make computer cases a lot sexier, skinnier, hide them away, and if I ever need to upgrade it, I don't have to open up the case. I just plug that component right into this. The other neat thing is if you have a laptop and you want to be able to dock it, if you will, so that your big monitor, your keyboard, your mouse, your printer, and everything plugs into it. Now, some people can go out there and buy a docking station and your laptop will drop right into it, but you have to have a special expansion port on your laptop, and you have to buy that docking station for that laptop, which means more money. And Apple's, their MacBooks or MacBook Pros, they don't come with docking station ports. This cable is their docking station, if you will, because you can have everything plugged into this hub, if you will, that you leave on your desk, and then you come in there and you plug it right in there, and everything is connected. One simple plug-in. Because of the bandwidth, we can do that. Let's see what you guys answered. You guys pleased me. All right, yes, that is called Thunderbolt. And did the little icon give it away? Yeah, well, it's a good time that marketing people are working with computer people, because computer people could care less with that. They look at the shape, they know it plugs in there, they're great. But marketing people are like, look, you need to make this more friendly. And that's one of the things that you get with an Apple. Things make sense. Okay. All right, let's go to the next one. Oh, we're going old school on this one. This port disgusts me, but out of all the ports that we've learned, this one has like the largest lifespan ever when it comes to computer technology. This has been around since like the 80s. And it disgusts me so much because the way I hooked up this computer to that projector was through this damn port. And it's about the only port in your computer system other than your sound, which would make sense. That's an analog port. Everything else has gone digital. And so the hints are stereo, VGA, DVI, or HDMI. And although it gets a bad rep for being analog port, it does support a lot of high resolution. And like I said, I'm really surprised it's lasted this long. In fact, on the side of this computer, we have a little cap, and there it is. And right underneath this port is some really good high-end display ports, if you will. And then another port, all dealing with video stuff. I'm just surprised that this thing has this long shelf life, because it should have been killed like 10 years ago, if you will. And that's what we do. We get rid of these ports that we don't use anymore. So, what did you guys guess? Impressive. Majority of you guys are right on. Yes, it's the VGA. It stands for Video Graphic Adapter, if you will. It is an analog port. why do I make a big point about it being analog versus being digital? Folks, I don't want you to think that digital is always necessarily better. In fact, this might be a test question. What is the difference between analog and digital? This port here is a digital port. I should have had a poll where I asked how many people think digital is better than analog. As with everything in life, there's always two sides to things. There are perks for analogs, and there's a lot of disadvantages for analogs. And there are perks for digital, and there's a lot of disadvantages for digital. The biggest advantage for analog is it's continuous. That clock in our classroom is an analog clock. Use your imagination. You see that little red handle that's going around the clock? It's sweeping milliseconds, nanoseconds, and any other seconds in between, correct? Even though we can't see it, it literally has to move 363 degrees all the way around for it to turn 1 minute. So it's capturing every second. Picoseconds, nanoseconds, milliseconds, 2 seconds, correct? A digital clock, well, a digital clock's like the one down lower corner of your screen, correct? You just see, what, hours and minutes. And maybe some of them will display seconds, and maybe milliseconds. Digital is discrete. As we are learning, we decide to capture only 16.8 million colors. Your camera, your digital camera, when you take a picture, will only choose 16.8 million colors. A film camera will capture all the colors. All of them. All the light. This is why when you go to scale a film camera up to a poster size, it doesn't lose quality. But try scaling up your digital camera to be a poster size. What do you need as far as specs are concerned to be able to make sure that the quality stays true? More pixels, right? You need to make sure you buy an 18 megapixel camera. The more pixels, the more light you're representing, correct? More light you're capturing. Well, so analog is true to the form, if you will. The biggest disadvantage with analog, it's hard to reproduce, and you start losing quality. I told you this is why first run films are excellent. They're true to quality, they're true to the capturing, but over time they wear out. Reproduction is miserable. So digital, quality's getting better, but in order for quality to get better, you need more bits, correct? So storage needs to be larger. So in my opinion, quality when it comes to digital, although it's improving to the point where you can't detect, in principle, it's not nearly as good as analog. However, what makes digital so nice is it can be reproduced. It can be touched up and reshared with a blink of an eye. That's why the music industry were running for the hills when Napster and all those other devices or services were coming out, because it's like, wow, put a song on a CD, it's digitized, you don't lose any quality when it comes to reproduction. Put a movie on VHS tape or put a song on a cassette tape, after 5 or 6 copies, quality would degrade. Which is why the next port after this was built. So what did you guys call this port? Let's check. Yeah, it's called DVI, Digital Video Interface. And that was the first time that we ventured into the digital video spectrum. That means these flat screens, if you will, understood a digital signal, so we gave them a digital signal. The more we can keep things on the same signal, the less processing we have to do. All right, let's go on to the next poll. Bless you. Okay. Oh, sorry, it's the port after this one. Okay, that's a expansion card. It's a sound card, more importantly. And there's your hint, right? But my question to you would be, because, I mean, this should have been evident because they almost look like microphone jacks, right? As if you're faced with this on the back of your computer, where do you plug in your speakers? Do you plug it into the blue one, the pink one, the orange one, the black one, or the green one? Because they are color-coded for a reason. And why are there so many of these different jacks? By the way, they're called 1/8-inch plugins or mini jacks.
Is it for the quality of the sound?
Actually, well, I wouldn't go that far. Quality of sounds, one, it's subjective, but two, it depends more on just your connections, if you will, like your speakers and everything else. So,
The different sounds?
close, Mitch.
5-channel
Surround sounds. Yep. And then maybe line in for microphones. Right. So that's what this is probably. This is probably a 5-channel, 5.1, if you will. So this black one's probably going to be the center and the sub. And then these two orange ones might be the side speakers and the rear speakers. And then maybe the blue one will be like the microphone in. And then this green one is going to be for your front left and right, which is the most common one that we use, right? Because you usually have a 2-speaker setup. And when you are shopping for speakers, the good companies would color code the jack, the plug, if you will, to green to let you know it plugs into the green. If you're getting a high-end sound card, these will be gold-plated. And maybe the good companies will tell you, like LR, SC, and so on. But if they don't, look at your manual. Or you can do what most people do. Play a CD. Keep on plugging it in until it starts sounding like audio's coming out. All right? So you guys should have answered, hopefully, A in that choice. Very good. That was a hard one. Okay. All right, let's step it up. This is the port I was talking about. This port was designed for only one reason and one reason only. Hdcp. There are better ports than this port here. But this port's popular because the Motion Picture Association of America, they were afraid that what was going to happen to the audio industry was going to happen to the movie industry. And they figured, well, think about this for a second. When you guys play a CD, encrypted or not, the audio has to leave to go to a pair of speakers, a pair of headphones. But why not to another recording device? Correct? So you could play the CD, plug the CD into like the line in on your PC, and then hit record, and then you would bypass any kind of mechanism. When DVDs came out, that was the first time that movies went digital. And they had an out. It would usually be sent out through like S-Video or RCA. What's to stop somebody from plugging that into a VCR or into a computer and record it, negating any of the encryption mechanisms that they used for DVDs. So they designed this port, which was, let's see what you guys have. Very good. So you guys seen this port before, HDMI. And the biggest thing about this port is, one, it allowed the audio and the video to come together, correct? But more importantly, it allowed the output device to communicate and develop a secure connection to the component. And that's what we call HDCP, High Definition Content Protection. So when you guys plug in your Blu-ray player or anything that uses HDMI, if the component, like your display, your TV, your monitor, doesn't support HDCP and you try to play a Blu-ray, it'll scale it down to really horrible quality or say, sorry, your monitor does not support this and we will not allow you to play the output. Okay? All for protection. Well, people found ways to crack Blu-rays, so it seemed like that was a trivial thing. But as with anything, deadbolt on a screen door.
What is that?
HDMI stands for High Definition Multimedia Interface. Multimedia being audio, video joined together. The latest HDMI ports are actually allowing you to push Ethernet through that. So you can do video, audio, and internet, if you will. Wonder ports. Not that one. That one. I know you guys are going to say that's not a port, and I'm sure you've seen the logo multiple times, and I had to give you a logo because I really couldn't show you this other than using an antenna, right? Because this is a wireless form of connecting things. But in my opinion, by definition, a port is anything that allows devices to connect together, correct? So this has got to be a port then, because it allows us to connect our headsets together to our phones to our computers. In fact, a lot of people question this port. Why hasn't it been replaced with the other form of wireless communications? And modern cars, I'm sort of envious. I want this for my car eventually. That's my big shopping thing, is that smart key. Leave my key in my wallet or wherever. You know, I told students 10 years ago that was going to happen. They looked at me and they laughed. And they're like, well, aren't we concerned about security and blah, 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 because it is wireless? And I go, well, this thing has a range of only like 10 meters or 30 feet. So if somebody's in the trunk of your car, then I would be concerned. But other than that, pretty nice. And what is this port? Yeah, there you guys go. Bluetooth. Not that I need to spend much time on that. So the question now becomes, what if there's a port that I want, like Thunderbolt, but I don't have it on my computer? What can I do to add that? So what are ways to add other ports or add more of the same ports to your computer? So we have this USB hub. We have a motherboard with a bunch of slots. Then we have this thing I mentioned earlier, which is more proprietary to the manufacturer of the laptop. So what do you guys think? Yeah, you guys are getting brighter and brighter. All right. What I want to tell you, however, is yes, obviously the best way to add is any of the choices. If I had to do this versus that, I would do this. Why would I choose this over that? Because they both do the same thing for me. They both give me 4 extra USB ports. But why would I choose this option? Portable, yes. But if I'm going to update my desktop, I could give 2 shits about portability.
Because the external is faster than the internal.
Well, I wouldn't go about speed. It's just so much easier than...
I would say because you have to install.
That's right. Because in order to add the expansion card, I'd have to deal with that mess. Correct? And then if you look at my computer at home, I have it buried deep somewhere because it makes a lot of noise. And I just got one of these hubs with a very long USB cord so that it sits on my desk. And because I'm getting tired of going into the closet to add my flash drive to transfer my movies over, right? So this gives me the ability to place it where I want it, whereas an expansion card has to be on these slots. The other issue becomes if you're going to expand internally, guess what? Now you need to know what the different slots are that make up your computer, right? So the 2 common ports or slots are going to be the PCIs and the PCI Express. As far as you guys are concerned, the only thing that's going to matter now are PCI Express. They used to be just used for video cards, but everything's going that route. Why convolute the mess? They're trying to simplify computers. So we had a slew of it, PCI Express 1, PCI Express 16, and so on. But we have PCI and PCI Express, and what's the difference? The Express switches over to lane technology or switching technology, which allows it to have faster performance. But more importantly, it allows other PCI Express cards to communicate with each other without bothering the CPU. If data is coming in and has to be manipulated, it's constantly going to the central processing unit, hence the name central processing unit. Out of all the stuff we talked about now, what generates the most data? Video stuff, right? And as the things go on, we are still progressing. HD is not there yet. In fact, they say the difference that you guys can see in video quality is when we reach 4K. Now, HD is 1K. So 4K would be 4 times the requirements. Right now, modern computers cannot handle that. Your own personal computers cannot handle it. So what do? We add multiple graphics cards. And we assign half the screen to each graphics card. So they only have to process half the resolution, right? It's like dual core processing. But the drawback would be if both graphics cards would have to communicate with the CPU or through the CPU to communicate with each other. You'd get that bottlenecking effect. Does that make sense? So if you guys have partnered up, but I say you can't talk to each other, you have to come to me. So we split this class in 7 partnerships. And then everybody has to wait their turn because everybody has to come through me before they can talk to their partner. Seems a little counterproductive. So we developed this stuff called cross-link or SLI, serial link. And so graphics cards can now talk to each other directly, sharing the load, giving you better results. Okay? So know that PCI Express is the slot of the future, and most newer computers are getting it, except for one. What type of computing device aren't getting these slots? Your laptops. Your laptops hardly ever come with expansion slots. There might be one, but what they'll do is they'll take your graphics card and they'll integrate it into your motherboard. When you guys think of integration, you need to think poorer quality, because integrated components are sharing the central processing unit to save cost, correct? If they're sharing that CPU, they have to sort of reduce quality because they know they have to play well with others. Dedicated components like your graphics cards will have their own processing unit. A graphics card would have a GPU, a graphics processing unit. And it would also have its own memory, because what have we learned? If you're going to have a processor, you must have what? Memory. Same thing with a sound card. A dedicated sound card will have its own processor. It's called a DSP, a digital sound processor. Okay? And what do you think it's also going to have? It has its own processor. Memory. All right. If you know that port, know this cable. Let's go to the next one. You know, I think next semester I'll have somebody else run this. What's the name of this cable, folks? Give you guys some more time. Yeah, it's jumping up there. That's right. It's a USB cable. USB 3 is going to be slightly different when it comes to this cable. It's going to have a roof on top of it, as you can see right here. So you'll see in USB 3 it looks more of like a trapezoid, or yeah, something like that. Let's see. What's this cable? Do you see how the shape matches the port, right? Because it can only go in one way. I love this cable in the sense that, talk about being smart, hence a product of Apple, if you will, quote unquote. Not that I'm sponsoring them, but it seems like they got their shit down when it comes to ports. Because the biggest complaint I have when it comes to USB is, how many times have you guys done this? Without looking, it doesn't go in, and then you take it out, and then you flip it around, and you put it in there. It's too symmetric. This one has a little triangle on the end of it to let you know it only goes in one way. There's no guessing at it. I gave you a hint. And it is Firewire, so it should be choice B. By the way, you guys are probably asking, do we have to keep on doing this? I keep these data. I keep the results, and I see how things get improved over the years. What's that port? I showed you in front of the class, or sorry, cable. Test that short-term memory. Very good. It is a Ethernet cable. This one's a give me, but hey, We'll call it a morale boost. What do you guys think? By the way, that cable's like 40, 60 bucks. Because if you flip it over, it's got a nice picture of an apple. It's really ridiculous. Copper doesn't cost that much at all. But it is a cable of choice because of the bandwidth that it offers. Yes, it is a Thunderbolt port cable. All right, storage. No, I guessed wrong. I mentioned this at the end of class. Was it Tuesday or Thursday of last week? Yeah, it was Tuesday when we were talking about shopping for a computer. I said this is the future of storage components. I didn't push it to you? Ah, that silly button. I was doing so well. No moving parts, no mechanical parts. Out of all those choices, only 2 of them do not have mechanical parts. We're trying to get away from mechanical parts because they break down, they wear. The other thing is they're slower, right? This thing uses tiny, tiny, tiny transistors, or gates, I should say, to hold data without electricity. It allows us to also jump to where the file's being stored. The way you can see this, if there's no moving parts, it becomes, and hence the choice would be, letter E, becomes solid state device. Looks like a hard drive, except in a hard drive, as you'll find out later, it has those platters I was telling you guys about, with the arms that hover over it. Here, there is no moving parts, so this becomes solid state. You could also say a flash or a flash drive, but I associate that with more of a portable because they're made of the same components. All right, now you got to do some thinking here, just a little bit. Get your Sherlock Holmes magnifying lens out, and you can become the detective. So what choices would you pick here? It's a disk, right? So it's going to be optical. And that eliminates the hard drive because the hard drive's magnetic. And also eliminates these 2 here because they're solid. They use transistors. So now we're stuck with CD, DVD, and Blu-ray. And folks, this happens all the time. If somebody leaves a CD out, you're not sure if it is a CD or a DVD or a Blu-ray, correct? Well, Blu-rays you can probably tell because in the back of a Blu-ray, they're typically blue. But that's not where they got their names. I want you to know that. They use a blue laser to record data. All right? Like a CD uses red or a DVD uses red. So, well, you can see over here this says CD-RW. But more importantly, I want you to recognize it's 700 megabytes. When a disk reads 700 megabytes, the maximum space a CD can handle. Okay? That's why we use CD to store audio, because audio doesn't require as much data as compared to movies. So yes, it's a CD, it's an RW. What does the RW stand for? So that means you can write over it over. These things are becoming obsolete. In fact, I was surprised that Apple has put another DVD drive in their computers. Why do I say they're becoming obsolete? What's that? I wouldn't say but same technology that's in MP3 players, but why are CDs becoming obsolete? Or even DVDs or even Blu-rays? Why are optical discs themselves becoming obsolete?
People stream movies.
You have the cloud-based storage, very good, because our internet connections are becoming faster, which gives you the ability to play it anywhere. What else? What's the other reason? And I'm really surprised Redbox hasn't done this. I had this idea like 8 years ago, and I think it would be perfect. That when you go shopping in Walmart, you have a little USB port in your cart, and you plug in your fill-in-the-blank flash drive, and then you can pick your movies as you're shopping because your internet connection is shitty at home. and then they get loaded into your flash drive, then you plug it on the side of your TV because it has a USB port, right? This whole connectivity, going back to what we talked about first week of class. And I just thought that'd be perfect. Do you realize how much freaking plastic is wasted on CDs? And more importantly, energy, space. Go to Walmart and look at their electronics aisle. Look how much could have been saved if they would have a server behind the scenes, and all you would do is bring your flash drive in or your phone or whatever, and as you're shopping around, it's transferring for you. And then when you check out, you pay for it and it unlocks the movie or the song or the software, whatever, fill in the blank. There is zero distribution cost because you don't have to pay somebody to leave California with a big semi-truck to bring it to New York. Zero heating cost. You can make your building smaller, more efficient. So that means movies should only be $1 or $2 and not $30. And let me ask you something. If a movie's $2, would you buy it instead of illegally going online and downloading it? Because the risk is negated over the cost. We call that what? Risk per reward kind of deal. But we crank up the cost because we try to find all this anti-piracy mechanisms. We still use plastic. We still deliver it because we haven't accepted this new way of distributing data. Hollywood's still old school. You can talk to my office mate who owns a theater. They are very, very, very behind the times. In fact, it costs him like $60 to $100 to get and it comes in a hard drive now, an external hard drive to get a digital movie. And I laugh. He's got an internet connection. I'm like, what's to stop you from downloading this thing? Zero cost and have it instantly available. UPS is like, shut up, shut up.
The airport has that now where you can pick movies, just download them.
Yep, off the airwaves. Yeah, we're getting there. We're just not there yet. Okay, which one is this? I believe on your lab, you guys were asked a question. What was the maximum size a Blu-ray? Well, there it is. I was pretty good about filling in the blanks here, but you're going to make a mistake here and there. Yeah, it's a Blu-ray. It says BDR, so what does the R stand for? You can only write once, right? It says 50 gigabytes. That's the max for a DL. Can anybody tell me what the DL stands for? Double layer, correct. And they do have a working prototype called a triple layer, which can do up to like 150 gigabytes. And once again, it's like, should we still push optical discs when flash drives you can get are like 128 gigabytes now? So it's like flash drives are reusable. CDs aren't. You record to them once. And so it's just this whole added cost. But yes, the other thing that you want to note is what do you mean by layers? We do not use light to actually store or hold the data. We use light to represent the data when it comes to it. A CD or an optical disc, whether it's DVD or Blu-ray, when you break it down and do a cross view, has a bunch of pits and valleys. So it's not smooth like it is on the outside. The outside is just plastic to protect this inner layer that actually holds the data. And when you bounce a laser beam off of a surface, it's going to be coming back and it's going to be detected. So this is the laser, this is the receiver, or the lens, if you will, that picks it up. When you bounce this, as this is spinning and this laser is moving, when you bounce light into a pit, the light doesn't bounce back out. So what do you think light would represent? The fact that it sees light.
Data?
A 1, right? And then what would you think if no light would be represented? 1, 0, right? And so with a double layer, what we do is we change the focus. And we stack them on top of each other. And so, because they're completely transparent. So we just adjust the beam's focus, and then now it'll go through the layer to the second layer. Just like when you're taking a picture of somebody, and you want to get the background and not the foreground, you just adjust the aperture, right? So the lens now focuses on the background and not the foreground. Now you guys just roll a dial. One looks like a mountain, the other one looks like a portrait, correct? Same thing here. Neat, but we don't talk about horses because we drive cars now, right? And the last one, oops. I removed all labels on this one. Now you're forced to look at the actual maximum capacity here. Well, by process of eliminations, if we covered CDs in blue, then you're going to say what? More importantly, do you see how the capacity of these disks logically have grown, but the physical size has not? Why did they decide to leave the physical size alone? So that a Blu-ray player, which we call a Blu-ray ROM, could play a DVD as well as a CD, correct? Backwards capabilities. Do you see why CDs were used to hold music, DVDs were used to hold standard definition, and Blu-rays used to hold high definition? If we go with the 2K or the 4K, which is going to be becoming popular in the coming years, guess what? Maybe Blu-ray 3 layers, tri-layers, triple layers will be out. Or maybe we just finally give up on opticals and we go streaming or flash base, okay? Because if we're going to do 2K, it's going to require at least 100 gigabytes of storage space. But what do you get by going 2K? Now you can start seeing the pimples on their face. Higher resolution, better quality, more smooth something becomes. All right. Oh, there it is. That's the one I was looking for. Let's test your intelligence. You adapt, you learn, you develop. What type of drive is that? You never get to see it this way because the case is always on it. In fact, I'll grab it out of this computer. Now your instructor's teaching you how easy it is to steal components. Never a good idea to take this case off. I mentioned this the other day. These are that read-write arms that I was telling you guys about. I don't know if you can see it from where you're at, but it's a really, really, really small read-write head. And like I said, if a piece of dandruff would fall onto this platter and that head would come across it, it would crash. It wouldn't be able to go beyond it because that dandruff would act like a big giant wall to it because it's this close. Why does it need to be this close to the surface? Folks, these drives are getting huge. Not physically huge, but logically huge. They're up to like 3 terabytes. That means I need 3 trillion tiny little magnets. If you're going to fit 3 trillion magnets onto a surface of many platters, what do you think the size of these platters, of these magnets are going to be? And if they're going to be that small, you got to get really, really close to them to alter their state. This is why it's never a good idea to take a magnet, external magnet, like a rare earth magnet, and run it up against the side of your computer, or even the side of this case, because it will literally change the polarity and you will lose data. And it's not a good idea to do this either. Now I'm all right with it because when the computer turned off, these arms got locked down here. Now you guys heard about that airbag protection for laptops, like what they call airbag technology? There's no airbag in your laptop. That is, if the computer's smart enough and quick enough that when they detect a movement like this, you shaking your laptop, these read-write arms will get locked in before they hit the surface of the disk. It's got to be some pretty fast technology to be able to detect changes. It's not absolutely perfect. In fact, this is why your hard drives crash in your laptops a lot quicker than desktops, because people aren't grabbing these out and shaking them like I am. But like I said, it's okay because these arms are locked in, they're away from the platter. If this thing was running and recording data, would it be okay to do something like this? No, unless you want to piss off your friend. So, external hard drives, big move. Everybody's buying them because of the backup reasons, because they're outside and you can plug them in. They have a very short shelf life. I've burned through many, many external hard drives. And the reason being is, just like your car, these are mechanical, they do overheat. There's bearings in here, there's motors. External hard drives don't have the proper ventilation. So when you go to use your external hard drive as a backup, as a tool for backing up your computer, do not do a massive backup. You will your first time. Turn off the external hard drive, unplug it, let it cool down. Because that's what they want you to do it with. They want you to back it up, unplug it, take it to a safety deposit box or outside your house. Then do what we call incremental backups. So only the files that have changed are backed up. Because if you're doing large backups after large backups after large backups, your external hard drives will cook. They'll get really hot, the liquids in these bearings will burn away, and then they'll seize up. Has anybody ever had a hard drive crash? Nothing's more depressing than when you lose everything. And as we start moving our pictures of our loved ones into a digital format, there's got to be a better solution. Hence, cloud-based storage. We'll get into that when we get into networking stuff. All right, so that was a mechanical hard drive, and you guys know what that one is, right? Flash drive. And I believe that should be the end of our PowerPoint. So before I let you guys loose, and before you guys go on to your nice long 2-day break, I promised you that I said when it comes to shopping for computers, the component that I won't buy a lot of is memory. But you should have a lot of it. The reason why I won't buy a lot of that from the manufacturer, from the company, is because they tend to charge an arm and a leg for it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the case back onto this computer, and I'm going to show you in a matter of seconds, not minutes, not hours, or anything like that, in a matter of seconds, how quick it is to upgrade your computer with memory. In fact, you might want to do this on your home computer. But be careful, because if you have a 32-bit version of Windows, you're not supposed to exceed how much gigs of RAM? How much? 32-bit operating system was the maximum number. 4 gigs is the maximum you can get. So pay attention, make sure it's not. And if you're not sure, there's usually a Windows sticker somewhere on your computer if you bought it from like HP or Dell or Compaq or whoever, telling you that it's a 32-bit edition or a 64-bit edition. The other way you can determine it if you right-click on My Computer and choose Properties. Okay? So, upgrade your computer. Easiest component and the most effective component to buy is memory. It's cheaper for the performance you get out of it. This main board right here is called the motherboard. You will see underneath this huge heatsink is the processor. Whoa, sorry guys. Does that make it better? You know, when technology becomes affordable, we don't care as much as we used to. Of course, my boss is watching these videos like, no wonder why we go through budgets. All right, so the main area is the motherboard. This thing is huge because the CPU gets really hot, but underneath it is going to be something really, really small. It's sort of funny, if you will. They're like clown shoes. When you take them off, you got tiny little feet. Same thing here. It's going to be a tiny little processor, but right above it are these DIMMs. And we put them physically above the CPU because by being physically closer to the CPU, it takes less distance to get there, hence it becomes quicker, correct? Because data is constantly going between the CPU and memory. And the reason why the data is going between CPU and memory is because we can't put enough memory on the processor. We call that cache, correct? So when I take out this memory, there's going to be a label on it. And on that label, I'm going to look at a few things. One, I'm going to try to find out what type of memory it is. This is a DDR2 memory. That's important to me. Because when I go shopping for memory, I have to make sure I buy DDR2, correct? The next thing is going to tell me the size. It's 1 gig. I have 4 sticks. These are 32-bit operating systems. This thing's filled up. It's upgraded as much as it possibly could be upgraded. On your computer at home, you might have 2 out of the 4 being used. This thing here costs about 10 bucks. To me, it's a lot cheaper than buying a new computer. Just to make sure you buy the right one. Now, I wouldn't necessarily read off these specs and go shopping for them. It's helpful. I'd find the make and the model of your computer, Google it, and type in memory specifications. Certain websites that you go onto have that built into their database, so you simply supply it and they'll tell you what your computer can handle. Now, how do you find out without ripping your computer apart how much memory you have? Real simple. If you're using Windows 7, you come down here to the Start button, you right-click on Computer, and you can click on Properties. You can see a list of specifications. I have a 64-bit operating system, right? Hence, it's okay for me to have 8 gigs of RAM. You can also see what type of processor I have and what kind of gigahertz it's producing or running at. Now, Windows or Microsoft is trying to produce a number that you can use to compare all types of hardware configurations. This is called your performance index or your Windows experience index. Ironically, it goes up to 7. 7 is the highest you can get in the Windows 7 system, hence the reason why they stopped at 7. So they're saying out of the 7, my computer rates at a 4.2. If I added more memory or if I added faster memory, I'm sure that number would go up. If I added a faster processor, once again, that number would go up.